My fellow Americans, I come to you having made a decision with which I know many of you will disagree, but I believe it is the right thing to do, and in the long run, best for our nation and for the future of our planet. So I will ask you to listen, and if you can, support this decision so we can be as united as possible. The unjustified invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin and Russia has been and continues to be based on a strategy targeting the innocent civilian population. Once Putin's initial effort failed to quickly overcome Ukraine's heroic defense forces, he switched to the inhumane and war crime tactics of bombing schools, hospitals, and children's playgrounds, while using rape and torture as a means to intimidate the Ukrainian population. We have made an effort to stop Russia by using sanctions and by supplying weapons to Ukraine. But these well-intended endeavors have not and will not stop Putin, who is determined to destroy every structure in the country if that is what it takes for him to subjugate Ukraine. We have done everything we can to avoid a nuclear war by insisting we will not put U.S. troops on the ground, not engage Russia in the air, or attack Russia on its own soil, or even on Ukrainian soil. Unfortunately, all this has done is embolden Russia because it believes it can act with impunity, knowing it can outlast a country with only 1/10 the resources of Russia. Due to our hands-off commitment, Russia believes it can use tactical nuclear weapons and outlawed chemical warfare to defeat Ukraine. So, even though it has been Putin and his threats of using nuclear weapons which created the risk of a nuclear war, we have done nothing to stop him from using such a horrendous option. In a sense, because our efforts and those of our allies have been so successful in providing arms, munitions, defensive systems, and intelligence to Ukraine, the country has been able to defend itself to a far greater degree than Russia or even the United States ever expected. Both countries' intelligence services failed because they originally predicted Ukraine would fall in a matter of days. However, Ukraine's success defending itself is driving Russia to make even more terrible and deadly decisions. But the reality is that we have only given Ukraine enough military support for it to die a slow, painful death. We need to give it the resources and support to win. The mistake we made by constantly telling Russia we will do anything to avoid a nuclear war has given Putin carte blanche to do anything he wants, because all he has to do is make a nuclear threat and he assumes we will back down, no matter what horrendous actions he takes. However, the battle in Ukraine no longer is just about the freedom and lives of Ukrainians. Important as they are, it is now also about Putin's strategy to deny food to the world, with the UN Secretary General having declared that Russia's tactics blocking Ukrainian grain and crop production and transportation threatens as many as 1.7 billion of the poorest people on the planet. It is now about Putin's attacks on Europe's largest nuclear energy facilities, which pose the threat of the greatest nuclear and radiation disaster in modern times. This could affect the entire planet if radiation is released and then spread around the globe. Just as importantly, this now is about the kind of world in which 195 nations live. It's whether the genocidal conduct of a superpower should be tolerated. It is about whether or not a nation breaking every vital rule of international conduct should be allowed to continue its criminal behavior. And it is about our responsibility to the world and whether or not the United States should stand by and watch as entire cities are leveled and as the elderly and children are slaughtered by Russia. Should those able to stop a bully from harming people stand by and watch, or should they intervene, even if it means they will get harmed in the process? Is it time for us to admit that the only way to stop some bullies and some terrorists is to use force? My answer is we cannot and should not stand by any longer. I believe those with the ability and power to stop a baseless attack on innocent people should not turn away to avoid seeing the slaughter. I believe we have a moral obligation to do whatever we can to stop the reign of terror led by the international criminal Vladimir Putin. Our strategy has been to arm the Ukrainians and have them extend the fight as long as they can. We have publicly said we see this as a way to weaken Russia by depleting its military capability. But a continuation of this strategy means tens of thousands more Ukrainians sacrificing their lives and ultimately hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian casualties. And it also means ultimately the subjugation of the Ukrainian people and our failure to hold Putin responsible for his murderous acts. Our timid approach no longer is the wisest or best strategy to pursue. It's not even the right one, because its success only means, due to recent Ukrainian military successes, Russia will resort to the use of weapons for which Ukraine and we have no adequate response. That is, if Russia uses illegal chemical weapons, we are not going to give similar weapons to the Ukrainians. And if the Russians use nuclear weapons, we aren't about to deliver nuclear weapons to Ukraine. The sad and terrible truth is that Putin is irreversibly committed to conquering Ukraine, even if it means the destruction of that country and its people. It is time we and our allies recognize this fact. In 1994, Russia and the United States convinced Ukraine to give up all of its nuclear weapons and transfer them to Russia on the condition that Russia, the United States, and Great Britain would guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty and its security. We all know had Ukraine kept its nuclear weapons, Russia never would have launched an invasion. Ukraine upheld its end of the bargain. Yet in 2014, Russia broke its promise by invading and taking over Crimea. It then even more grossly violated that same promise with its unjustified invasion of Ukraine. It's now time to face the reality that any promise made by Putin is meaningless. And it's also time for America to keep the promise we made to protect Ukraine. In this war, America has been participating with one hand tied behind our back. I am untying that hand today. And with our allies, I am announcing the end of the war in Ukraine via an immediate ceasefire by both sides. I've consulted with the leaders of Congress and our allies and have their support to do the following. First, the allied nations are declaring all Ukrainian airspace as a no-fly zone. Any non-ally aircraft entering this space will be shot down. This condition will be enforced starting in 24 hours. Second, if Russia does not respect the no-fly zone or fails to terminate its offensive military actions, my administration will designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism and impose severe conditions on that country and, as a result, on all of its allies as well. Third, if any flights or missiles are launched targeting Ukrainian targets by Russia or its proxies, we will destroy those jets, planes, helicopters, drones, rockets, and missiles, as well as their launching locations. If you shoot a missile, we will destroy you. If you don't shoot a missile, you have nothing to worry about. Fourth, we and our allies will help Ukraine build back its defenses by immediately providing Ukraine with the long-range systems it has been requesting for months. This will allow Ukraine to strike key Russian targets if Russia fails to respect the ceasefire. This would be part of a $100 billion humanitarian and military aid package we will propose to Congress for immediate approval. Fifth, we will give Russia 48 hours to begin moving all of its troops and equipment out of Ukraine. This effort must be completed within the next 15 days. If we don't see sufficient movement, we will begin sinking every Russian war vessel in Ukrainian waters, as well as taking out any land-based position Russia attempts to maintain in Ukraine. Sixth, the United States and its allies are sending an international force of 5,000 troops to take over control of the area including the Zaporizhzhia power plant. To ensure there is no loss of life by Russia or any country, we will give Russia 24 hours to vacate the area within a 5-mile radius of the plant. Seventh, I am authorizing our military leaders to begin a 1-year effort to send an additional 100,000 troops to join our NATO allies, and to develop a plan to add 250,000 more men and women to our armed forces. It is reasonable for you to ask, won't these actions provoke Russia and have them initiate a nuclear war? The answer is, that's possible. But if we don't act now, due to Putin's growing desperation, the risk of a chemical or nuclear war will become even greater over time, as will the growing list of threats to our European allies and the rest of the world. Right now, Russia can leave Ukraine, and Putin can tell his people he accomplished his key objectives. Most Russians have been unaffected by the war, and by ending it now, Putin avoids a dark future, which would expose his severe misjudgments to his own people. Obviously, Ukraine does not present a threat of any kind to Russia, and never did. And the damage Russia has done to Ukraine will take hundreds of billions of dollars and decades to repair. Sadly, the thousands of Ukrainian lives which have been lost can never be replaced, nor can we end the suffering of millions of Ukrainian families. But we can stop more carnage from happening. Does Russia want a nuclear confrontation? Vladimir Putin is a very intelligent man. I am convinced Putin knows if he were to start a nuclear war, his country won't just be devastated, it will be eradicated. Putin does not want to go down in history as being responsible for the total elimination of Russia and its reduction to radioactive piles of rubble. None of us want that. Russia is an extraordinary country with bountiful resources and an amazingly talented, hardworking population. It has a great history, and if it chooses, can have an even greater future ahead as a leader of nations. America and its allies are prepared to work hand in hand with Russia, so it and all nations have the opportunity to achieve their potential. But Russia's potential is not going to be achieved by it murdering hundreds of thousands of innocent people. That has to stop today, and we are going to stop it. Each American also has an important role to play during this crisis. In an effort to stop the billions of dollars Russia earns from its oil and natural gas sales, the United States and many of our allies are ending the purchase of these Russian products. But our allies need alternatives in an energy market which is highly constrained. One way each of us can help is to reduce our own energy consumption so prices stabilize internationally, and so there are more resources available for those seeking to cut off Russian supplies. Therefore, I'm asking every American to support Ukraine and our allies by uniting in an energy conservation effort. Our goal is to reduce our energy consumption by 15% for at least the next 12 months. When you are using heating, please turn down your thermostat by a daily average of just 4 degrees. When you are using cooling, just turn up your thermostat by a daily average of 4 degrees. Try to reduce your driving mileage each week by just 1/8, and minimize the purchases you make which get delivered to your home. If we all join together and do this, we will help make energy prices more stable and make energy supplies more plentiful for our allies, as well as help the planet. I realize many of my fellow Americans will disagree with me, and that the political implications of this decision likely will be terribly unfavorable for me. While this saddens me, I know it's far more important to do the right thing than doing what is most politically expedient. The right thing, based on what America stands for, is to do everything we can to end the war in Ukraine. I hope you will join me in this difficult decision and do whatever you can to support Ukraine and our allies. God bless America, and God bless our troops.